Most people who struggle financially know what they should be doing. Save more, spend less, invest early. The information is widely available. The problem, for a significant portion of the population, is not a lack of knowledge. A 2024 survey found that over 60% of adults say their childhood experiences directly influence their current financial habits. That figure points to something the standard financial advice industry rarely addresses. Most financial behavior is not primarily rational, it is psychological, and its roots run much further back than adulthood. In the same period, a Discover survey found that 4 in 5 Americans carry some anxiety about their financial situation, with 34% experiencing moderate or severe anxiety. A 2025 Northwestern Mutual study of more than 4,600 adults found that nearly 7 in 10 Americans said financial uncertainty had made them feel depressed or anxious, an 8 percentage point increase from 2 years prior. A Wallet Hub survey conducted in October 2025 found that 44% of Americans believe their financial status defines their self-worth. These are not the numbers of people who need a better spreadsheet. They reflect something more durable, patterns of belief and behavior that financial literacy alone has consistently failed to resolve. In 2013, the British government's Money Advice Service published a report authored by behavior experts David Whitebread and Sue Bingham of the University of Cambridge. The researchers reviewed existing evidence on how children develop habits and beliefs with a specific focus on financial behavior. Their conclusion was direct. Money habits, including the capacity to plan ahead and delay gratification, are typically formed in early childhood. Guy Schoen, the research director for the Money Advice Service at the time, summarized the finding plainly. The developmental window, he said, is 0 to 7 years old. Once those habits form, the research indicates, reversing them later in life is difficult. That finding carries a practical implication that a T. Rowe Price survey made concrete. Most parents report waiting until their children are around 15 years old to begin teaching them financial basics. By that point, according to the Cambridge research, the foundational framework for financial behavior has already been in place for nearly a decade. Children do not form those early habits through formal instruction. They form them through observation. The way money was discussed or avoided in the household, the emotional register that surrounded financial decisions, the visible stress or stability of the adults around them. All of it was absorbed, processed, and encoded before the child had the conceptual tools to evaluate it. The clinical term for what gets built during that period is a money script. The concept was developed by financial psychologists Dr. Brad Klontz and Dr. Ted Klontz, a father and son who have spent decades working at the intersection of psychology and personal finance. In their 2009 book, Mind Over Money, they define money scripts as underlying assumptions or beliefs about money that are typically only partially true, are often developed in childhood, and are unconsciously followed throughout adulthood. In 2011, Klontz and his colleagues published a formal study in the Journal of Financial Therapy. Using a sample of 422 individuals assessed against 72 money-related beliefs, they identified 4 distinct categories of money scripts. 3 of those 4 categories showed significant correlation with a person's income and net worth. The first is money avoidance, the belief that money is bad, undeserved, or morally suspect. People carrying this script often avoid financial planning, tend toward under-earning, and find ways to push away financial stability even when it becomes accessible. The second is money worship, the belief that more money will resolve all problems. This script tends to produce overwork, overspending, and a persistent sense that the current level of income or assets is never quite enough. The third is money status, the fusion of financial worth and self-worth. People with this script link their identity to visible markers of financial success, which often leads to social comparison, lifestyle inflation, and spending that tracks image rather than actual financial position. The fourth is money vigilance, a strong orientation towards saving and financial security. This script can produce disciplined financial behavior, but in its more rigid form, it generates anxiety and an inability to tolerate even reasonable financial risk. None of these scripts is inherently destructive, but when they operate without awareness, When a person does not recognize that they are following a set of inherited beliefs rather than making deliberate choices, they consistently produce outcomes that bear little relationship to actual income or circumstance. Clance and Clance also identified the mechanism through which these scripts are transmitted. They describe what they call financial flashpoints, early life experiences associated with money that carry sufficient emotional weight to leave lasting impressions. These are not limited to dramatic events. A financial flashpoint can be a recurring pattern. Parents who argued regularly about bills, a household that treated any expenditure as a source of shame, or a family where money was spent as a demonstration of status. It can be a single comment absorbed at an age when the child had no framework to assess its accuracy. Research published in the Journal of Financial Therapy found that children raised in households with high levels of financial stress are more likely to develop problematic financial behaviors in adulthood. The pattern is consistent with what developmental researchers call social learning, the process through which beliefs, attitudes, and norms are transmitted through observation and emotional experience rather than through explicit teaching. Clance and Clance identified the financial comfort zone as a related mechanism, the socioeconomic level at which a person feels psychologically normal regardless of their actual income. This comfort zone is typically established in childhood. When adult income rises above that threshold, the psychological pull toward the familiar can work against continued financial progress, even when the individual has the knowledge and the means to sustain it. 4 primary channels drive the transmission of these patterns. The first is modeling. Children observe and internalize parental financial behavior. The second is direct instruction. Explicit rules and messages about money pass through the household. The third is financial flashpoints, the emotionally charged experiences that create durable associations. The fourth is the comfort zone itself, established through sustained exposure to a particular financial environment. The persistence of these patterns is better understood through the behavioral economics research developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Kahneman, an Israeli-American psychologist at Princeton University, was awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences in 2002. The prize committee citing his work integrating psychological research into economic science, particularly around human judgment and decision-making under uncertainty. Kahneman and Tversky established that people do not make financial decisions through careful, rational analysis. They rely on mental shortcuts, heuristics, that allow the brain to process situations quickly and reach conclusions without deliberate reasoning. These shortcuts are useful for managing daily life, but they introduce systematic errors, and critically, they are shaped by prior experience. Kahneman's framework distinguishes between 2 modes of cognitive processing. The first is fast, automatic, and associative, operating largely below conscious awareness. The second is slower, deliberate, and requires active effort. When a person encounters a financial situation, the first mode responds immediately, drawing on encoded associations built over a lifetime. A person who grew up associating money with danger will experience that association as a physical or emotional response before any deliberate reasoning takes place. This is why financial information alone is insufficient to change financial behavior. Rational knowledge is processed through deliberate thought, but the behavior that follows a financial stimulus is frequently driven by the faster, automatic system, the one carrying the imprint of early experience. Kahneman and Tversky also documented loss aversion, the finding that people weight potential losses significantly more heavily than equivalent potential gains. In controlled experiments, most people would not accept a 50-50 gamble unless the potential gain was at least twice the size of the potential loss. For someone whose early financial environment was defined by scarcity or instability, aversion to financial loss can be strong enough to override decisions that would be objectively beneficial. Their 1974 paper on heuristics and biases, published in the journal Science, has been cited more than 54,000 times. Kahneman's 2011 book, Thinking Fast and Slow, extended those findings to a broader audience. He died on March 27, 2024, at the age of 90. Richard Thaler of the University of Chicago, whose work built directly on Kahneman and Tversky's foundation, received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017. The research also documents what happens when the inherited pattern does not replicate but inverts. Children raised by frugal or financially restrictive parents sometimes respond in adulthood with compulsive spending, compensating for what felt like deprivation. Children raised in financially chaotic households sometimes become rigid savers, driven by a sustained effort to avoid recreating early instability. In both cases, the adult behavior is being determined by the childhood experience. The direction reverses, but the underlying driver remains the same. Whether it produces mimicry or inversion, the dynamic is the same. Financial behavior shaped by inherited belief rather than independent analysis. The goal is not simply to behave differently from one's parents. The goal is to make financial decisions from a position of awareness, rather than from an unexamined script. Longitudinal data reinforces how persistent these intergenerational dynamics are across populations. Research using data from the Panel Study of Income Dynamics, which has tracked American households for nearly half a century, found that a 1 decile increase in parents' wealth position correlates with approximately a 4 percentile increase in their children's wealth position in adulthood. The researchers also found that grandparental wealth predicts grandchildren's wealth independently, above and beyond the influence of parental wealth, indicating that the transmission of financial position extends across multiple generations. Studies estimate the intergenerational wealth correlation between parents and children at between 0.28 and 0.37, with some estimates rising higher when accounting for measurement limitations. These figures carry additional relevance given the scale of wealth currently changing hands. Baby boomers and the silent generation are projected to transfer a combined $84.4 trillion in assets through 2045. An Edward Jones study found that nearly half of all Americans plan to leave an inheritance. The financial beliefs and behaviors that accompany that wealth, the scripts, the comfort zones, the risk tolerances formed across a lifetime will travel with it. Research published in 2010 by Kahneman and Deaton found no significant correlation between happiness and money once household income rises above a certain threshold. They also found that the substantial economic gains experienced by Americans in the preceding decades were not accompanied by equivalent increases in life satisfaction. These findings run directly against the money worship script, the persistent belief that the next income level will produce the stability or satisfaction that the previous one did not. The current anxiety data provides additional context. With 87% of Americans reporting financial stress at least once a week, 69% reporting that financial uncertainty has made them feel depressed or anxious, and 44% equating financial status with self-worth, the scale of the problem exceeds what individual circumstance can explain. The pattern reflects something systemic in how financial beliefs are formed and transmitted across generations. The research does not conclude that these patterns are fixed. The work of Clance and his colleagues in financial therapy, along with the established evidence base for cognitive behavioral therapy, documents that money scripts can be identified and changed. The process begins with awareness, recognizing the automatic belief or emotional response that precedes a financial behavior. It moves to examination, assessing the actual evidence for that belief against current circumstances rather than past experience. It continues with the deliberate construction of alternative responses grounded in present reality. Financial therapy as a formal discipline combines the tools of mental health treatment with the practical realities of personal finance, proceeding from the documented premise that financial behavior is not primarily an informational problem, it is a psychological one. The Cambridge researchers noted that while habits formed in early childhood are difficult to reverse, reversal is not ruled out. What the research consistently shows is that the starting point for change is accurate identification, understanding that the patterns driving financial behavior were largely formed before the individual could evaluate them, and that they reflect inherited belief rather than objective fact. The 60% of adults who report that childhood experiences shape their current financial habits are not describing a feeling. They are describing a documented mechanism, one that operates across income levels, across generations, and largely outside of conscious awareness. Addressing it requires more than information. It requires understanding where the behavior actually originates.